Hi guys, this is Erica Weston with Fox Sports Midwest, and you're listening to my favorite St. Louis Blues hockey podcast, Let's Go Blues Radio.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Haley Wickenheiser, and this is Let's Go Blues Radio, Past to the Future.
This is Jeff, continuing the summer series for Let's Go Blues Radio, and today I'm joined by Ray Ferraro. Yes, a former St. Louis Blue, although I think he only played in a total of, I believe it was 20 or maybe 25 games with the Blues, including playoffs and regular season. But Ray is an analyst for TSN, co-host of Overdrive, I believe, with Jamie McLennan, at least works with Jamie, former a guest of the show. And Ray, thank you very much for joining the show today.
Yep, thanks. I hope everybody's well. I hope people that are listening are doing well and feeling good. And we're in the midst of this here in late March, and everybody trying to just find one foot to put in front of the other right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's we were talking a little bit there off air about what life is like having kids at this point. It's not easy, but I guess it's you do the best for the common good at this point.
Well, that's the goal. I don't know if we're getting to the numbers that we need to get to of people for the common goal and the common good, but you can only. I heard this quote early on when this all became pretty clear that we were into something that a lot of people were going to deny or not pay attention to, and it's look after yourself so you can look after the person beside you. And really, for the first time in our lifetimes, many of us are being asked to make a very, very small sacrifice, although there is major ramifications to it. And for some people, that small sacrifice is too much. They can't quite do it, and I don't get it why. I assume they have parents. I assume they have grandparents. I assume you care about people around you, and for our family, it's laying low to the ground here. We're at home. We get into the backyard. We go for a walk. I mean, man, we wish we were doing stuff too, but that's really just not what's available right now.
Yep, and that's what I tell myself is I'm not doing this for myself, and maybe not even doing it for my kids, but I'm doing it for my mother who's still around and kicking. So, like you said, doing it for the people around you, and that's the goal here. So, Ray, I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to talk to you about something that the Blues fans, I think they know your nickname that came on after you joined TSN, and I know the story, but I want you to go ahead and explain it to those that maybe don't, and maybe there's a part I'm missing. Why is the words chicken parm associated with Ray Ferraro?
Well, actually, it's not TSN where it started. It was at ESPN when I was still playing.
Okay.
And a man by the name of Barry Sachs, who was in charge of on-air talent for ESPN2 at the time, he called me, and he's a big Rangers fan, and I had played for the Islanders and then went to the Rangers and was traded to LA. And so he called me and said, "Hey, would you like to do some TV work?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I've never really done anything before other than interviews." And he said, "Well, look, because I got traded from the Rangers to the Kings, he said, look, you're not going to make the playoffs. We'd like you to come in and do a round on TV," which now is pretty commonplace. You see a lot of players do it when their teams are eliminated, but back then nobody really did it. And so I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll come in there." And so the first year I did it with Bill Pito and Barry Melrose. And I guess it went all right because they asked me to come back for a couple of rounds the next year. And so playing for a team that didn't make the playoffs actually was great for my broadcasting career because I didn't really have a broadcasting career at that time. I was still playing, and all of a sudden now I've got opportunity to be on ESPN. They're the national carrier. And so by the second year, John Butchergross was the host. And so before every show, we'd I mean, ESPN wasn't like it is now. Now they've got this huge kitchen, and you can get all kinds of different foods. Back then, you're in Bristol, Connecticut. There was about 4 restaurants, and one of them was an Italian place across the street. And I think I had chicken parm 26 out of 30 days when I was there. I really like it, and I really like theirs. Well, the problem with it was you got it in takeout, so the utensils were these plastic forks and knives. So one day we're eating, and my plastic fork explodes, and the chicken parm drops into the sauce, splatters all over my shirt, which would have been the end of it, except when we went on the air that night, Butchie decided to tell the story, and so I've got my shirt, which looks like a gunshot wound. I've got it hidden underneath my jacket, but in any case, I got spaghetti sauce all over me like a slob, and so he started calling me chicken parm, and it just never went away.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of those nicknames, hey, it could be worse. I know plenty of people who've had some bad incidents with nicknames, and it just seems to follow them around. So I think there's something that could be worse than chicken parm.
It could be a lot worse, but that's just the way it is.
That's right.
That's where it came from.
So I wanted to ask you, early on in your playing career, obviously you played parts of, well, you were in the NHL for a long time, played for 6 different teams. Portland Winterhawks was the team you played for before that, and you guys were the 1983 Memorial Cup team. I'm asking you to kind of sift through the memory banks here, because I looked at the roster of that team, and my goodness, it was you, Cam Neely, Mike Vernon, John Kordick, and then just a plethora of other great players. When you were on that team, and again, I know I'm asking you to go pretty far in the past here, did you think that there was potential to have 6, maybe 7 or 8 NHLers on the roster?
Yeah, actually, our team was outstanding. Our top line was Kenya Remchuk, who never really made it into the NHL long term, but he was the 7th overall pick of his draft year. Cam Neely's in the Hall of Fame. He was his right winger. Our second line had Alfie Turcotte. He was a first-round draft choice. I was the third-line center.
Wow.
And, I was a 5th-round draft choice out of Tier 2 junior in Penticton, where actually Dougie Waite's boy, Danny, plays up in the BC Junior League, and so that's where I got drafted out of. And so we steamrolled through that year and ended up winning the Memorial Cup, but we were really good. We actually picked up Mike Vernon you were able to pick up, it's kind of a goofy rule, you were able to pick up a third goalie for the Memorial Cup tournament. Well, our third goalie happened to be the best goalie in the league, so we picked up Mike Vernon, and he became our starter. And we went on to win the Memorial Cup. But we were, that team was really, really good. And then I got traded after that year to Brandon.
Oh, of course, that's just how it works. So speaking of being traded, I mean, obviously you had a long NHL career before you arrived in St. Louis, which was your final destination before calling it a career. But you ended in St. Louis. You ended up with 10 goals in 15 regular season games. 10 points in 15 regular season games, 3 assists in 10 postseason games for the Blues, who lost in the second round of the Red Wings that year. But I want to talk to you about the team you were with before you came to St. Louis. So you were with Atlanta, which now most know is a defunct team. But the season prior to being traded, you were tied for your 3rd best point total in your career at that point. 29 goals, 47 assists, and 76 points. You actually led the team, and I thought, well, maybe, looking back, maybe this is a Kovalchuk Keatley, maybe he was centering those guys. Looking, you still had a solid wingers with you. You had Donald Audette, Andrew Burnett, Patrick Stefan was on that team. When you hit 76 points that year on an Atlanta team that didn't make the playoffs, what do you contribute your success to?
Well, it's funny, sometimes you have line mates that might have a high profile and, it looks like that line's going to really work, and other times the line just fits. And for me, I was on a line and played the entire year with Andrew Burnett and Donald Audette, and Donald could score, man. He could shoot the puck, and Bruno's a fantastic passer. And one of my, probably my best friend that I played with, and we just connected. I mean, like, man, we knew where each other were on the ice. We knew our power play was good, and for a team that wasn't a great team, right? We were a second-year expansion team, and we had times there where we simply just didn't have enough depth to hang with the teams that if we were gonna move up in the standings. Our line was among the league's best that year, and I was healthy, which had really become an issue for me in the latter part of my career. I had all kinds of knee problems, and that year I went start to finish without any, and it was an awesome year. It was I had a lot of fun with it. Our line was like teams had to worry about our line when they didn't worry about too much in Atlanta, right? Like we weren't threatening too many people, but they were concerned about our line, and it was kind of cool to be like that again.
Yeah, that's again, looking at that roster, I was impressed by the point totals that your line put up. Very good stuff. And so anyway, you come to St. Louis after that. This was the next season. You were traded, I believe it was right before the trade deadline. Obviously, having a long career at that point, you had already played in St. Louis. I'm sure you knew guys that played for the Blues. And but what was your impression of St. Louis before you came to the town? And then did that change at all once you started playing some games there for the Blues?
Well, I did get traded right before the deadline. I got held out of a game in Atlanta, and nobody really said anything. And then about in the middle of the third period, our general manager, Don Waddell, called me and said, "I traded you to St. Louis. Got to call Larry Plow." And so I called Larry, and I said, "Yeah, we need you to play tomorrow night against Nashville." And this was about 10 o'clock at night. And I said, "Okay, what do I do?" And so, I scrambled down to the room, got my gear, didn't really have time to say goodbye to anybody. I had to pack for basically 2 months. Got all that stuff together. The next morning, I was actually separated. I was getting divorced, and so I ran over to the house to say goodbye to my boys, who were 13 and 10 at the time, and said, "I'll get you to St. Louis as quick as I can." Jumped in the car and went to the airport and got to St. Louis, and the only guys I knew there were Scotty Young, who I had played with in Hartford, and the coach. I had played with Joel Quenneville in Hartford as well, and so there was only that familiarity to the Blues team. I didn't know anybody else. As far as the city, I knew the 2 blocks around the rink and where the old St. Louis Arena was, where I started playing in St. Louis, but that was it. I didn't know anything about it, and ended up living out in Clayton, and loved it. I found there was a whole heck of a lot to St. Louis that nobody sees if you're just coming in to play a hockey game and leaving. And the people were great. They're really, really nice. I enjoyed the area that I lived in, and got to know a little bit about it. And, although I was only there for just a pretty short while.
So you obviously played on a team with future Hall of Famers, Chris Pronger, Al McInnes, and then obviously guys like Keith Tkachuk, Doug Weight were on that roster. This was obviously the Blues trying to gear up for another big run. The year before, they had gone to the conference finals and lost to the Avalanche. So I'm sure that when you got the call that you were traded to the Blues, there was some excitement of, hey, I'm at the latter stages of my career. Stanley Cup is what I want. Did you think that team had a pretty good shot at winning a Stanley Cup?
I thought it was the best team that I'd played on in a long, long time. I did know that if you're going to go anywhere, and when I got traded, we were just outside the playoffs. So the first job was to try and get in, but I knew that if the team was going to go anywhere, we were going to have to get through Detroit, and that's when, Detroit had Luc Robitaille and Brett Hull on their fourth line.
Mm-hmm.
That was one hell of a team. That was, they turned out to be the Stanley Cup champions, but I felt like, man, this team is so good and so deep, and I got there. Certainly I was added as depth. Doug Weight was just coming back after he had some kind of like a bad pelvic injury. He had like fractured a pelvic bone or something, or like it was a unheard of injury, more like a car crash injury. And he'd been out for months, and he was just stepping back into the lineup. And then Al got hurt his eye, and he was out. And then in the playoffs, we lost Chris Pronger too. And so everything that, you know, I kind of thought might be really wasn't available. I mean, you know, you're losing 60 minutes of ice time with Al and Chris out of the lineup, and, you know, Hall of Famers and, you know, dominant personalities in the room and on the ice, and then Doug Waite was their top center, and just nowhere near, you know, he wasn't near 80%. You know, he was just trying to get his way back into the lineup at that time.
Yeah, that was one of those years as a Blues fan. I know that I sat and said, "Oh man, like this was a good team, but the injuries just caught up to them late in the year." And I think that a lot of Blues fans would agree that seems to happen a lot. And then obviously this past year, and just kind of jump ahead here, did you come to St. Louis at all to cover the Stanley Cup final? Were you here for the parade? And what were your thoughts on the Blues championship team from last season?
I was there with TSN. I was doing we do our Sports Center hits and stuff, so we were doing pre and post game stuff throughout the finals, and it was really awesome to see how the city rallied around the Blues, how the watch parties just outside of the arena, and I wasn't there for the parade, but I remember walking by up in the press box and walking by the alumni box, and each home game there was like more and more and more guys coming back into town. Everybody wanted to be connected to this team. It seemed like everybody was really proud to be associated with the Blues, and it was really cool to watch. Craig Berube is a fantastic guy, and he did an amazing job. And man, that team they just ground everybody to a pulp. I did the first round series when they knocked out Winnipeg, and I want to say that was really even though they'd had that great second half of the year, it was in that series where I went, you know what, these guys are really good. Not just a pretty good team. In the last game, I want to say when they beat Winnipeg, they knocked them out in St. Louis. I want to say they gave up 6 shots through 2 periods.
That sounds right.
And it was like, man, they just smothered them.
Yeah.
They didn't let them move. And that was really the first indication that I had, and I was at the game, of course, as I was broadcasting it, that, man, this team they're not a fluke. Like, this is really, really a good team.
So, kind of getting into a little bit about your playing career, and maybe even work in some of your analyst career here. What's your favorite NHL city? You don't have to say St. Louis, but what's your favorite city to either play or broadcast in? I know if you don't say Toronto, people might be mad too.
I think everybody's got their own favorites, right? I love going to Montreal. I don't get there enough. I like the culture there. I like the food. I like old Montreal where you walk around. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place. And the Bell Center is as good a place to broadcast a game from as anywhere. If I were up top. Now, most of the time I'm down below, so, where I'm standing in between the benches. And as far as there being a favorite place there, I don't really have one, I guess. Toronto is pretty interesting that there's no glass on either side of the benches. So, I'm literally standing right on the bench. It's, you're pretty close to what's going on. That's for certain. As far as cities to go to, I'll take anywhere warm. So Tampa and Los Angeles are a couple of my favorites. I played in LA for 4 years, so I know lots of people there. But I would say Montreal is my favorite city to go into. If it's in the spring, though, I will say Boston because I am a Red Sox fan, and I do love getting to Fenway.
I have to ask you about one of my favorite play calls of all time, and this was when I decided that Ray Ferraro is a mainstay for TSN broadcasts, because this was just the way you called it was perfect. And it was early in your career. It was actually on January 4th, 2007. Patrick Stefan missed the empty net for Dallas. And I know you know where I'm going. The Oilers came back, scored on that play. One of the things you said that was just, it was emotion and it was hilarious at the same time, but I thought it was just the perfect thing to say. You said, Patrick Stefan, you should be ashamed of yourself. That was just so funny to hear a broadcaster with raw emotion like that. Was it something that you were kind of like, as a hockey player, really actually upset about? Or was it, kind of, well, I'm broadcasting this game, I need to make sure that the Oilers fans know how dedicated I am to the game of hockey?
No, I don't broadcast like that. I don't. I think one of my, people that have listened to me, one of my calling cards is people understand that I'm honest. I try to be as honest as I can, as much as I can, and sometimes maybe that doesn't endear me to some people, but I'm not there to, I don't blow smoke. I just it feels disingenuous to me. Mm-hmm. As for that play, yeah, it pissed me off. And the reason it did was I played with Patrick.
Right.
I played with him for 3 years in Atlanta, and I'd seen that sort of nonchalance to his game, and it always bugged me because Patrick was good. Mm-hmm. He could have been a really good player, a better player than he was. Now, injury took some of that away from him, but also that's just the way he was. And and I had some people say back to me, well, the ice was bumpy and, jumped over his stick. And I'm like, he's in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And this is the best league in the world. It's not the same game as beer leaguers play. It's played on the ice. I get it. That's the same, but nothing's the same. So you're 10 feet away, shoot the damn thing in the net. Like, he tried to just push it in. And so as far as it making up for broadcasting, nope, I don't do that. That's just not my way. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. Now, had he just missed the net and the game ended, it wouldn't have been a big deal. However, not only did he fall down when he missed the net, as he went to keep the play alive, he ended up passing the puck right to one of the Oilers. Like, he was lying down and he tried to spin it back to the front of the net, and it went right to one of the Oilers, and 2 passes later it's on the stick of Alashemsky, and the game's tied. Mm. And that took about, I don't know, it couldn't have taken more than 3 seconds to go from end to end. It was astounding. Yeah. And that adds a lot to it too.
Yeah, no, that's the answer I wanted to hear, was that it was pure emotion. That's the way I read it. Again, I'm a hockey player too, and I see plays like that, and I see plays where, the puck will be shot in from the red line and it just bounces on the goalie and goes in. And, I get that, oh, wow, that was really cool to see. But at the same time, it was, oh, God, you got to feel for that goalie. So, yeah, hearing that you're like me and you react with emotion, it makes that play even better.
Well, I mean, I would say that's the way I played. I played with emotion, both good and bad. Took a lot of penalties I probably shouldn't have taken, but that's kind of the way I'm wired. That's so whether I'm doing that or I'm playing a board game, it's not always the best.
Right.
That's kind of just the way I'm wired, I guess.
Yep. Ray, I wanted to ask you again real quick too. You were talking about emotion for being a broadcaster, but you do the NHL EA series, and I have to ask you, how odd is that for you? Is it completely scripted, or do they say, "Hey, here's going to be the breakdown of the play. What would you say here?" I mean, how was that one done for you?
There is no script, so everything you hear, or James Cebulski, who's the play-by-play voice, we're making it up. So basically, there'll be something on a computer screen. There's nothing to watch. It's just a computer screen, and it'll say, for example, home team is leading mid-first period. They have the edge in shots. And then I have to make up 5 or 7 things about that.
That's interesting.
And so then it might be focused player has chance on net, misses the net from a scoring area. And then same thing, make up 5 or 7. So we do it, of course, like everything else, we're shut down right now, but we're in there about 20 hours a month.
Wow.
And it's a lot harder than I thought, in that you have to be super creative with it, and I'm not a really creative person, except I seem to be able to come up with enough stuff that they like the way that I do it. Because I'm not, like, for example, when I say I'm not creative, like, if you told me to write a story about what I see outside, it would take me a long time to generate some ideas about what's going on, or to draw a picture. I mean, man, I don't create anything in my head like that. That just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't happen for me. But this, I seem to be able to, to find enough words to put it together. But there's no script, there's nothing to watch, there's no game.
Wow.
And it's just me in a sound booth.
Well, it comes off as genuine, so you're doing something right.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it does. That's the goal.
Yep. Will you be coming back for NHL 21?
Yep.
All right.
Well, right now, I mean, we're sitting in a holding pattern. We've got lots of stuff that we have to do, and we're always working out in advance of the game that's on now, right?
Right.
So the game that's out now, NHL 20, we're working in advance of that.
Cool.
So we're laying stuff down for next year's game, and things that change and get added. There's some pretty cool stuff being added, and then we're always in there doing updates where the gamers will contact EA and say, hey, this is sounding a little repetitive, and they'll say, okay, we need 6 more examples of this play, and so we'll have to go do that as well. And so we're kind of like we're open to whatever our bosses say. Hey, this is the target for today. We want to get through X number of lines in the script, and I don't know, some of them there might be a few hundred of them, and by the end of it, you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't want to listen to anybody, you just want to go sit and relax for a half an hour.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you. So I got something for you. So the next time that when you're recording something about the city of St. Louis, you can say, this is St. Louis, the home of Let's Go Blues Radio. So go ahead and throw that in there next time.
You know what? I can say just about anything in there.
Might not make the cut.
My kids are big soccer players, and so when somebody scores into the top shelf, they wanted me to say top bins.
Nice.
Because that's a football soccer call, and so you'll hear top bins in the game, and that's from my 10 and 13-year-old.
Awesome, very cool. Ray, this has been very cool to talk to you again. You're one of my favorites over there on TSN. It's a shame we don't get you more here on the state side, but think you do a great job out there. Like I said, you and McLennan, you guys do great together as well. So I want to give you enough time here at the end to promote anything that you want. I know you've got a podcast with Darren Dreger. Just go ahead and anything where people can reach you on Twitter, if they want to reach you on Facebook, any kind of social media, and then where they can find your work.
Well, thanks. I do appreciate the people that reach out, and of course, sometimes Twitter gets to be a little bit of a minefield. But I have my Twitter account. I'm on our podcast, the Ray and Dregs podcast. We've done 25 episodes now, and we really like it. It's a lot of fun, and of course, what makes it fun is Darren Dreger's a good friend, and we work together at TSN, but also, and more importantly, it's the guys that come on and tell the stories that they tell, and people seem to enjoy them. There's always, like, Jamie was our last guest, and man, he tells a couple of stories there. One of them that I would never do justice to, but basically he ends up eating fried bologna sandwiches in Kid Rock's house at 4:00 in the morning. So, you you should go ahead and I hope people will listen to the podcast. But I'm pretty straightforward. Twitter, Ray Ferraro TSN, and Ray and Drake's podcast is where you can find us for that. And I'm like everybody else, hoping that there'll be hockey again this year, but more hopeful that that we get this virus under control so everybody of all walks of life can return to some normalcy.
I agree with that. Well, Ray, thank you again very much. I appreciate you coming on today.
Awesome. Thanks. Have a great day and look after yourself.
You too. What are you doing? Why are you watching me right now? Don't you know you can be podcasting Let's Go Blues Radio right now and check out an interview about somebody who's a prospect in the organization? What are you doing? Why are you watching me? Get out of here. Go. Go.